What if the ground beneath Giza still breathes? What if beneath the weight of 5,000 years the desert still murmurs the sound of something buried? Not dead, but waiting. There are moments when the wind slides across the plateau and seems to carry a low vibration, a whisper that feels older than the stones themselves. Maybe it's the sound of sand shifting, or maybe it's memory. The Great Pyramid has stood longer than most nations have existed. Yet, despite its massive certainty, it is surrounded by silence. Architectural, political, spiritual. Dr. Charles Pemberton, 57 years old and seasoned by 3 decades at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, has mapped its inner chambers, drilled its limestone, scanned it with radar, and still its heart remains partly unknowable. Pemberton's weathered hands trace the outline of subsurface readings on his laptop screen, the blue glow casting shadows across his face in the pre-dawn darkness of his field tent. Beside him, thermal imaging data streams from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, reveals temperature variations in the bedrock. Patterns too geometric to be natural, too persistent to be coincidence. After 18 months of systematic scanning, the American team has documented what Egyptian authorities have spent decades trying to ignore. Beneath the pyramid, deep below the bedrock, legends whisper of tunnels that stretch toward the Nile, chambers cut from stone and then sealed forever. Some say they lead to a hidden vault, others to nothing but myth. But what if both are true? What if the myths were always the most accurate maps? In the 5th century BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus visited Egypt and recorded something few modern scholars still mention. He claimed that priests told him the Great Pyramid sat above an underground chamber connected to the Nile by a secret passage. Within it, he wrote, lay a sarcophagus on an island surrounded by water. For centuries, those words were dismissed as imagination, a foreigner's confusion before the grandeur of Egypt. Yet when Pemberton's team deployed the most advanced ground-penetrating radar technology available to American universities, they found cavities filled with moisture exactly where Herodotus had described them. They found traces of engineered channels, mathematical precision in the spacing of voids, and they found silence from the authorities who had once invited them. The invitation, it seemed, came with invisible boundaries. Egypt's desert is not solid. It is a layered archive made of sediment and salt and time. Beneath the visible ruins, Pemberton's radar has detected large voids, massive spaces hidden below known corridors. The data points to a network extending 12 meters deep, connecting not just the pyramid's base, but reaching toward the Sphinx and beyond, like the roots of some vast stone tree. Dr. Susan Pemberton, Charles's wife of 28 years, and a specialist in acoustic archaeology, has spent the last decade mapping the sound signatures of these buried spaces. At 53, her ear for architectural resonance has become legendary among American researchers. She describes the subsurface chambers as whispering galleries, spaces that amplify and transform sound in ways that suggest deliberate engineering rather than natural formation. The acoustic properties are impossible to ignore, she explains, reviewing spectrographic analysis from her latest deep scan sessions. We're detecting resonance frequencies at 110.6 Hz, 220.2 Hz, and 440.4 Hz, perfect harmonic progressions that match human brainwave patterns during meditative states. This isn't coincidental. Someone understood the relationship between sound, stone, and consciousness. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, coordinated by Dr. James Kellner, a 49-year-old physicist whose previous work included developing muon detection systems for the Department of Energy, confirmed what rumor had long implied. An enormous empty space, sealed and untouched, lies above the Grand Gallery. the cosmic ray muon tomography revealed a void at least 30 meters in length, large enough to house a passenger jet, positioned with the same slope and alignment as the gallery below. The world called it the Big Void. Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities acknowledged the finding with carefully worded statements that praised the international cooperation while emphasizing the need for further study. Yet, as the data spread through scientific journals and online forums, something strange happened. Permission to explore deeper was withdrawn. Excavations froze. Press conferences were postponed indefinitely. Statements turned vague, then stopped altogether. It was as if curiosity itself had become a threat. Dr. Ahmad Farouk, the 68-year-old former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, offered explanations when pressed by American journalists. Preservation, stability, respect for heritage, all diplomatically phrased, all technically valid. But perhaps it's simpler, perhaps more honest. Sometimes what we don't know is safer. Sometimes the foundations of civilization depend on what remains buried. The resistance comes from multiple directions, each with its own logic, each contributing to a conspiracy of silence that feels less like cover-up and more like collective caution. Egyptian nationalism guards against Western appropriation of their heritage. Academic orthodoxy protects established timelines from revolutionary disruption. Tourism boards preserve profitable mysteries while avoiding inconvenient revelations. And somewhere beneath all these human motivations, the desert itself seems to resist, covering fresh excavations with sand, flooding tunnels with groundwater, making the earth itself complicit in its own concealment. At night, the Great Pyramid absorbs the moonlight until it glows faintly like a mountain of breath held too long. People have stood before it for millennia, searching for meaning in its angles, proportions, and silence. Scholars say it was a tomb, though no royal body was ever found inside. Others claim it was a temple of initiation, a machine for resurrection, or even a code written in stone, a geometry that speaks to the stars. But beneath all theories lies one question that refuses to fade. If the surface tells us so little, what does the earth beneath it remember? Ancient Arabic manuscripts hint that there were once entrances to lower passages near the Sphinx, long since sealed with granite plugs weighing several tons each. Some explorers, like the Frenchman Dr. Henri Beaumont in the 1930s, claimed to have seen signs of an underground lake shimmering in torchlight before being escorted away by authorities. The incident was documented in his private journals, discovered decades later in a Parisian estate sale, but his photographs mysteriously disappeared from the archaeological record. British engineer Sir Edmund Whitfield, one of archaeology's most meticulous figures in the late Victorian era, found cut shafts descending toward the water table at precise 45-degree angles. His measurements, recorded in copperplate handwriting that still survives in Cambridge University archives, describe corridors extending beyond the reach of our lamps into depths where the air grows thick with mineral scent. Yet he never explained what lay beyond them. The official record lists unfinished work. The unofficial record, scrawled in his personal diary, lists restricted access by local authorities. Dr. Richard Thornton, a 55-year-old radar specialist from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, has spent the last 6 years analyzing subsurface anomalies using synthetic aperture radar and electromagnetic induction surveys. His findings, published in limited circulation journals after Egyptian authorities restricted broader dissemination, show a network of tunnels extending 8 to 12 meters beneath the surface. The pattern is too geometric to be natural, rectangular chambers connected by corridors that maintain consistent dimensions across hundreds of meters. The engineering precision is remarkable, Thornton explains, pointing to three-dimensional models generated from his radar data. We're looking at channels carved at specific gradients to manage water flow, chambers positioned to optimize acoustic resonance, and structural supports that have maintained their integrity for thousands of years. This isn't primitive tomb construction. This is hydraulic engineering that rivals contemporary subway systems. The water connection may be the key to everything. Herodotus described the underground chamber as surrounded by water, with a sarcophagus resting on an island. Modern hydrology confirms that the Giza plateau sits above a natural aquifer fed by the Nile's annual flood cycles. When the river swelled each year, water would rise through the fractured limestone, filling underground cavities before retreating again. To the ancients, this rhythm may have symbolized rebirth, the rising and falling breath of the earth itself. Susan Pemberton's acoustic measurements reveal that water-filled chambers create entirely different resonance patterns than air-filled ones. Sound travels 4 times faster through water than through air, she notes, reviewing her latest hydrophone readings. If these chambers were designed to flood and drain with the Nile's cycles, they would have functioned as massive resonators, amplifying frequencies during high water periods and modifying them during low water periods. The builders may have created an instrument that played different notes depending on the season. In 1991, a team of Egyptian geophysicists conducted seismic tests near the pyramid's base and detected reflections consistent with water-filled cavities more than 30 meters below ground level. The data were never widely published, appearing only in fragmentary references in local geological surveys. Fragments of those reports, obtained through academic exchanges between American and Egyptian universities, speak of subterranean anomalies suggestive of fluid presence and recommend further investigation when political conditions permit. Political conditions, it seems, have never quite permitted. When American teams propose drilling narrow-bore holes to study the groundwater composition, a standard procedure in archaeological hydrology, they encounter bureaucratic mazes designed more to discourage than to facilitate. Environmental impact studies stretch across years. Permit applications disappear into administrative limbo. Site access becomes contingent on approvals from multiple government ministries, each with different requirements, different timelines, different unspoken agendas. The Egyptian government quietly installed pumps around the Giza plateau in the 1990s, officially to manage groundwater levels for monument preservation. But locals report that the pumps operate at night, when tourists are absent and international observers are sleeping. The extracted water, according to maintenance workers willing to speak off the record, sometimes contains mineral traces inconsistent with normal aquifer composition, metals, and crystalline deposits that suggest the water has been in contact with worked stone for extended periods. Dr. Alfonso Mendez, a 51-year-old astronomer from Politecnico di Milano, whose stellar alignment calculations helped confirm the Orion correlation theory, believes the underground chambers may have served astronomical functions. If water levels rose and fell with predictable cycles, they could have created a kind of hydraulic computer, he proposes, sketching diagrams that show how changing water pressure might have moved mechanical elements within the chambers. The ancient Egyptians were master astronomers. They may have built physical models of celestial mechanics, using water and stone to track stellar movements across decades or centuries. The serpent slithers through every mythology like a line of code written into the human imagination. It winds across Egyptian temple walls, coils around the staffs of pharaohs, and guards the gates of the underworld in tomb paintings that span 3 millennia. In Egypt, it was called Mehen, the protector of Ra as he journeyed through the darkness. It was also Apep, the eternal enemy, the serpent of chaos that tried to swallow the sun each night. The Egyptians feared it, revered it, and in some ways became it. For the serpent was more than a creature. It was a symbol of cyclical time, of energy that consumes itself only to be reborn. Modern eyes see decorative art. Ancient minds saw instruction manual. The serpent's movement mirrored the undulation of electromagnetic energy, the spiral of galaxies, the double helix of life itself. Long before Watson and Crick mapped DNA, the ancients carved its twisted structure into their sacred architecture. Dr. Kellner's electromagnetic surveys have detected field patterns around the pyramid that follow serpentine curves, spiraling upward from the base in helical formations that match the mathematical relationships encoded in the structure's geometry. "We are measuring electromagnetic signatures that pulse at specific intervals," he reports, reviewing data collected over 18 months of continuous monitoring. The patterns repeat every 23.5 hours, slightly less than a solar day, but exactly matching the period of Earth's magnetic field fluctuations. The implications reach beyond archaeology into quantum physics. If the ancient builders understood electromagnetic resonance, if they deliberately shaped stone to interact with planetary energy fields, then they possessed knowledge that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The pyramid may function as a massive antenna, concentrating and amplifying natural electromagnetic phenomena in ways that affect both human consciousness and environmental conditions. In the Temple of Dendera, a strange relief shows figures holding elongated objects that emit serpentine energy streams. Mainstream Egyptologists interpret these as ritual implements, symbols of divine power translated into artistic metaphor. But American electrical engineers studying the carvings have noted remarkable similarities to modern plasma discharge tubes and electromagnetic field generators. The ancient artists may have been documenting actual technology, encoding scientific principles into religious imagery as a form of preservation across cultural collapses. Susan Pemberton's latest acoustic research has uncovered frequency patterns that mirror the mathematical constants found in both DNA replication and electromagnetic wave propagation. The builders weren't working randomly, she explains, adjusting sensitive hydrophones positioned at calculated intervals throughout the pyramid's accessible chambers. Every measurement we take reveals harmonic relationships that connect sound, structure, and natural electromagnetic fields. They understood that consciousness itself operates on specific frequencies. The hieroglyph for Djed, meaning serpent, is identical to the waveform pattern of alternating current electricity. Ancient scribes may have been documenting energy principles that our civilization had to rediscover through centuries of scientific experimentation. To the priests, sound itself was a living serpent, vibrating through stone, awakening responses in both matter and mind. Dr. Mendez's astronomical calculations reveal that the Giza complex functions as a three-dimensional star map, its monuments positioned to mirror the constellation Orion as it appeared around 10,500 BCE. This dating pushes the site's origins back thousands of years before the accepted dynastic period, suggesting that the pyramids were built not by the pharaohs who claimed them, but by an earlier civilization whose knowledge was inherited and carefully preserved. The serpent constellation, what we now call Draco, occupied the celestial North Pole during that epoch, Mendez notes, pointing to computer models that recreate the ancient sky. The builders may have aligned their underground chambers with both Orion and Draco, creating a kind of astronomical calculator that tracked stellar movements across the 26,000-year precession cycle. The precession of the equinoxes causes Earth's axis to wobble like a spinning top, slowly changing which stars appear at the celestial poles. Ancient astronomers, lacking written records that could survive millennia, may have encoded this knowledge into permanent stone monuments that would continue functioning long after their civilization ended. The serpent biting its own tail, the Ouroboros, becomes a symbol of this eternal return. Everything in the cosmos moves in cycles: stars around galaxies, planets around stars, seasons around years, civilizations around the wheel of rise and fall. The Egyptians built their monuments as landmarks in this cosmic rhythm, markers that would help future peoples remember their place in the larger pattern. Egyptian pharaohs wore the uraeus, a cobra rising from their crowns, representing awakened consciousness and divine perception. The serpent spat fire at enemies, but its true purpose was illumination, the activation of higher awareness that could perceive beyond the illusions of linear time. Modern neuroscience has discovered that certain electromagnetic frequencies can indeed alter brainwave patterns, inducing states of expanded consciousness that ancient texts describe as speaking with the gods. The builders may have understood something we are only beginning to rediscover: that human consciousness can be modified through precise combinations of sound, electromagnetic fields, and architectural geometry. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb or a temple. It was a consciousness-altering device designed to awaken dormant capacities in those who entered its chambers with proper preparation and intent. The desert does not remember in years. It remembers in layers. Each grain of sand carries a trace of something buried before it, a memory of oceans, forests, and rains that fell when the Sahara was green. If one listens closely, the wind itself seems to tell stories, not of kingdoms or pharaohs, but of endings. The Great Pyramids, timeless as they seem, were built in a world that had already forgotten a catastrophe. A quiet line divides their age from the age that came before it, a boundary drawn not by rulers, but by fire and flood. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas boundary event. Others call it the Great Reset. Around 12,800 years ago, Earth changed almost overnight. Ice melted, then froze again, then melted once more in cycles of violence that rewrote continental geography. In Greenland's ice cores, a black layer of soot marks the event, evidence of global fires that consumed forests from North America to the Levant. Temperatures plummeted, megafauna vanished, and entire cultures were erased from the archaeological record. Dr. Thornton's geological surveys around Giza have uncovered similar burn layers in the limestone bedrock, carbon dated to approximately 12,750 years before present. We're finding evidence of extreme heat exposure, he reports, examining core samples under magnification that reveals microscopic glass spherules, materials that form only under temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. The patterns suggest atmospheric heating events, possibly from cosmic impacts or solar plasma discharge. The Clovis hunters in North America disappeared without explanation during this period. In Göbekli Tepe, far from Egypt but connected by mythic thread, people suddenly began building massive stone circles, as if trying to preserve something against approaching chaos. Across the world, construction projects of unprecedented scale began simultaneously, not gradual cultural evolution, but urgent preservation efforts. The world was starting over, and those who survived carried fragments of what had been lost. The Egyptians later spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time, the age when gods walked among men and restored the world after a great deluge. Perhaps it was their distant recollection of that reset. The Sumerians, thousands of miles away, told of the same catastrophe, the same divine rebuilding. Even in South America, in temples carved high in the Andes, stories persist of the world before the sun, when light and time were broken. It is as if every ancient culture began its history by remembering the end of another. The Great Sphinx may hold the scars of that moment. Geological surveys by American researchers have found deep vertical fissures along its enclosure walls, patterns carved not by sand and wind, but by sustained, heavy rainfall. The erosion dates back to a time when the Sahara was still fertile, when rivers coursed across its plains, and the climate supported vast grasslands where now only sand remains. Dr. Pemberton's team has documented similar water erosion patterns in underground chambers beneath the Sphinx. Carbon dating of organic deposits found in sealed cavities suggests the last major flooding occurred between 11,000 and 9,500 years ago, precisely during the final phases of the Younger Dryas climate reversal. To accept this evidence is to push the Sphinx, and by extension its builders, back to a period before known civilization, perhaps before the flood itself. The monument becomes not a guardian of pharaohs, but a survivor of a forgotten epoch, a witness from the world that ended. If the Sphinx truly predates Egypt's dynastic kings, then the story of human development requires fundamental revision. The monument would represent not the beginning of civilization, but its remembrance, built as a gesture of recovery, a message to future generations. We endured. Do not forget how. The reset was not only physical, but spiritual. Imagine the trauma of a planet that saw its order destroyed. The night sky itself would have changed as atmospheric debris obscured familiar constellations. Seasons would have inverted. Calendars would have become meaningless. To rebuild after such devastation required more than tools. It required myth. And myth, for the ancients, was never fiction. It was architecture for the soul. By transforming disaster into story, survivors preserved the memory of what must never happen again. The flood narratives found in every ancient culture may represent humanity's first attempt at psychological healing, turning incomprehensible catastrophe into comprehensible narrative. Even today, traces of that event ripple through geological evidence. Beneath Antarctica's ice, researchers have found crater-like depressions suggesting multiple impact sites. Across North America, the Carolina Bays, elliptical lakes numbering in the hundreds of thousands, align as though carved by falling debris from a consistent direction. In the Middle East, including the region around modern Egypt, layers of blackened soil mark sudden fires that burned simultaneously across thousands of square kilometers. Everywhere, the same chronological signature appears. 12,800 years ago, a heartbeat of destruction, then silence, then the slow process of rebuilding. The knowledge used to rebuild may have been borrowed rather than invented. In the Hermetic texts attributed to the Egyptian sage Thoth, it is written that humanity remembered the works of the gods and built again as before. If this is accurate, then the so-called dawn of civilization was not an awakening, but a remembering. There are places in Egypt where the sand seems to ripple like water, where the dunes rise and fall with a rhythm that feels deliberate, as though something beneath them is breathing. Hawara is one of those places. A stretch of land south of Cairo, near the Fayum oasis where legend claims the earth hides a labyrinth vast enough to humble any empire. Its story is older than the pyramids, older even than the memory of those who built them. Herodotus, who saw its remnants in the 5th century BCE, said it surpassed all other monuments in magnitude. He wrote that it contained 12 covered courts, 3,000 chambers, and endless passageways of polished stone. Beneath it, he claimed, lay another level entirely, an underground world where the dead were buried, and where priests guarded secrets of creation itself. Today, there is almost nothing left to see. A flat expanse of sand, fragments of limestone scattered like forgotten bones, and a few half-submerged ruins from the reign of Amenemhat III. The locals still call it the city under the earth. But according to official archaeology, the labyrinth no longer exists. Erosion, quarrying, and the passage of millennia erased it long ago. Yet the ground says otherwise. Dr. Pemberton's team, working in collaboration with the Dutch expedition led by Dr. Martin van den Berg, has conducted the most comprehensive subsurface surveys of the Hawara site in modern history. Their ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistance tomography have revealed rectangular anomalies of immense size, foundations aligned with mathematical precision, buried under 6 to 8 meters of accumulated sediment. The data suggests chambers still intact, arranged in perfect geometric grids, van den Berg reports, reviewing three-dimensional models generated from electromagnetic induction surveys. We're looking at walls that extend for hundreds of meters in straight lines, chambers large enough to house aircraft hangars, all preserved beneath the silt. If Herodotus was accurate, this structure would dwarf the Great Pyramid in terms of enclosed volume. The implications are staggering. If a labyrinth of such proportions truly exists beneath Hawara, it would represent an architectural achievement that challenges every assumption about ancient engineering capabilities. The logistics alone, excavating millions of cubic meters of bedrock, installing sophisticated drainage systems, creating structural supports capable of bearing enormous loads across vast spans, would require knowledge and technology that supposedly didn't exist in the ancient world. Why would such a discovery fade into administrative silence? The answer may lie in what the labyrinth represents. Ancient Egyptian texts describe it as a house of life, a repository where scribes copied sacred texts, where geometry and medicine intertwined, where the boundaries between science and spirituality dissolved. Some historians believe it may have been a monumental per ankh, a library so immense that it functioned as its own universe of knowledge. If that interpretation is correct, the labyrinth might contain records that predate any known civilization. Archives that preserve knowledge from before the Great Reset, documentation of the world that existed before the catastrophe 12,800 years ago. Such records would not merely rewrite history. They would prove that advanced human civilization is far older than our current paradigms allow. American archaeological teams have attempted to secure excavation permits for Hawara since the 1990s, but have encountered resistance that goes beyond normal bureaucratic caution. Environmental impact studies stretch across decades. Funding proposals disappear into administrative labyrinths more complex than the ancient structure they seek to explore. Site access becomes conditional on approvals from multiple Egyptian ministries, each with different requirements, different timelines, different unstated agendas. The pattern suggests deliberate containment rather than scholarly caution. In 1843, German archaeologist Carl Richard Lepsius documented massive stone blocks scattered across the Hawara site in patterns that could only belong to a colossal structure. Later, British engineer Sir Flinders Petrie excavated what he believed were the foundation walls described by Herodotus, measuring a base area of 304 by 244 meters, larger than a football stadium, more extensive than most modern cathedral complexes. But when Petrie reached water-logged strata, he stopped digging. The groundwater of the Fayum had risen like a protective barrier. He covered the excavation site, leaving behind a brief report and a cryptic final note. The rest must wait for the desert to withdraw. That was more than a century ago. The desert has not withdrawn. Instead, the water table has risen higher, creating what hydrologists describe as a natural preservation environment that keeps organic materials and architectural details in near-perfect condition beneath the surface. Some researchers believe the labyrinth was deliberately flooded by its builders as a preservation strategy. If they foresaw the approaching catastrophe, perhaps through astronomical calculations that predicted cosmic impact events, they may have sealed their most important knowledge underwater, creating conditions that would protect texts and artifacts for millennia. The flooding would have required sophisticated understanding of hydrology and hydraulic engineering. The builders would have needed to calculate water flow rates, design drainage systems that could be sealed and opened as needed, and create structural supports capable of withstanding both water pressure and seismic activity. Such engineering sophistication suggests technological capabilities that our timeline of human development cannot easily accommodate. The silence that surrounds these discoveries feels deliberate, like a conspiracy of caution that operates across disciplines and decades. In 2002, when Dr. Pemberton's team proposed drilling narrow-bore holes to study groundwater composition beneath the pyramid, a standard procedure in archaeological hydrology, they encountered resistance that transcended normal academic review processes. Environmental impact studies were required, then additional studies to evaluate the environmental impact studies. Cultural sensitivity assessments demanded consultation with religious authorities who had no clear jurisdiction over pre-Islamic monuments. Permit applications disappeared into administrative limbo, emerging months later with new requirements, different signatures, modified scope restrictions that made the original research impossible. Site access became contingent on approvals from the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Antiquities, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and departments within the military whose involvement was never clearly explained. Dr. Ahmad Farouk, speaking privately to American colleagues during a Cairo archaeological conference in 2019, offered a moment of candid explanation. You must understand, every discovery changes the narrative, and narratives in Egypt are not merely academic. They affect national identity, religious beliefs, economic relationships with the international community. Some doors, once opened, reshape the entire house. The systematic nature of this suppression becomes clearer when viewed across multiple sites and timeframes. In the 1990s, Japanese teams using electromagnetic surveys detected large voids beneath the Sphinx's right paw. Their preliminary reports described architectural anomalies consistent with constructed chambers. Permits for exploratory excavation were initially approved, then revoked after what officials described as further consultation with preservation specialists. The Japanese data was reclassified, removed from public databases, and subsequent references to the discovery were deleted from official publications. Researchers who inquired about accessing the original findings were informed that the data had been transferred to long-term storage pending review of international excavation protocols. Similar patterns emerge around discoveries at Saqqara, Abydos, and other major sites. Initial excitement gives way to bureaucratic complexity, which evolves into administrative silence. The message becomes clear. Certain questions are not meant to be asked, and certain answers are not meant to be found. Yet within the accessible portions of the pyramid complex, American researchers have documented phenomena that challenge conventional understanding of ancient capabilities. The acoustic properties of the King's Chamber continue to yield measurements that suggest deliberate engineering rather than coincidental geometry. Susan Pemberton's most recent studies, conducted using equipment borrowed from NASA's acoustic testing laboratories, reveal that the chamber's granite walls create standing wave patterns at frequencies that correspond precisely to human brainwave states during deep meditation. We're measuring resonance peaks at 7.83 Hz, 14.3 Hz, and 20.8 Hz, she reports, adjusting sensitive hydrophones throughout the chamber's interior. These frequencies match the Schumann resonance of Earth's electromagnetic field and the alpha, beta, and gamma wave patterns associated with expanded consciousness states. The implications extend beyond archaeology into neuroscience and consciousness research. If ancient builders understood how specific frequencies affect human brain function, they may have designed the pyramid chambers as consciousness-altering environments, spaces where enhanced awareness could be induced through precise combinations of sound, electromagnetic fields, and architectural geometry. Dr. Kellner's electromagnetic surveys have documented field fluctuations within the chambers that pulse in synchronization with these acoustic frequencies. The granite contains high concentrations of quartz crystal, he explains, analyzing mineral composition samples under laboratory conditions. When subjected to pressure or vibration, quartz generates piezoelectric effects, essentially converting mechanical stress into electrical energy. The entire chamber may function as a massive crystal oscillator. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called Heka, often translated as magic, but more accurately understood as the natural power of vibration to shape reality. Priests believed that spoken words were not merely symbols, but active forces capable of influencing both material and spiritual dimensions. If the pyramid chambers were designed to amplify and focus such intentions, they represent a technology of consciousness that modern science is only beginning to comprehend. When sound waves interact with the chamber's geometry, visitors report experiences that transcend normal sensory perception. Some describe feelings of weightlessness. Others report visual phenomena despite complete darkness, and many note alterations in time perception that persist for hours after leaving the structure. These subjective reports, while dismissed by conventional archaeology as psychological suggestion, correlate with objective measurements of electromagnetic and acoustic activity within the chambers. The pyramid may indeed function as a consciousness-altering device designed to induce specific neurological states in those who enter with proper preparation and understanding. The builders left no instruction manual, no explanation of operational procedures. But they did leave the device itself, still functional after 5 millennia, waiting for a civilization advanced enough to understand what they created. That we are only now developing the scientific instruments capable of measuring their achievements suggests either remarkable prescience on their part or remarkable ignorance on ours. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what the ancients knew, but what we have forgotten about the relationship between consciousness, matter, and the forces that bind them together. Imagine descending into such chambers, torchlight flickering against, wet stone, the air thick with the scent of minerals and age. Corridors stretch in all directions, turning upon themselves like veins within a living body. The sound of dripping water echoes like distant footsteps. Every chamber reflects another, as if the labyrinth were designed not to be walked, but contemplated. A riddle of stone meant to mirror the structure of consciousness itself. In myth, labyrinths are not prisons but mirrors. The Minotaur's maze, the spiral of Daedalus, the serpentine paths carved into ancient temples all point to one truth. The journey inward is the journey downward. The deeper one goes, the older the questions become. Beneath the Sphinx, those questions have not vanished. They have merely gone quiet, waiting in chambers that radar confirms, but authorities refuse to explore. The rectangular voids detected by American ground-penetrating systems show geometric precision that contradicts natural formation. These are carved spaces, engineered with the same mathematical relationships found throughout the Giza complex. Dr. Thornton's latest electromagnetic surveys, conducted using equipment normally reserved for planetary geology missions, have mapped a network of connected chambers extending from beneath the Sphinx toward the pyramid complex. The chambers follow consistent architectural principles, rectangular forms connected by corridors that maintain precise gradients, all oriented to cardinal directions with accuracy that matches the surface monuments. We're looking at a mirror image of the above-ground complex, Thornton explains, reviewing three-dimensional models generated from years of accumulated data. Every major surface structure has a corresponding subsurface component. The Sphinx sits above what appears to be a central hub, with corridors radiating outward like spokes of a wheel. The engineering required to excavate and support such a network would challenge contemporary construction techniques. The water table that protects these chambers may also reveal their purpose. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of the waters of Nun, the primeval abyss from which creation first emerged. Temple carvings show this cosmic ocean flowing beneath the world, supporting the land of the living while providing passage to the realm of the dead. If the underground chambers were designed to flood and drain with the Nile's annual cycles, they may have functioned as physical representations of these mythological waters. Initiates could have experienced symbolic death and rebirth by descending into flooded chambers during high water periods, then emerging when the waters receded. A process that combined psychological transformation with hydraulic engineering. Dr. Susan Pemberton's hydrophone recordings from accessible water-filled areas beneath the plateau have captured acoustic phenomena that defy conventional explanation. We're detecting structured sound patterns that repeat at regular intervals, she reports, analyzing waveforms recorded during different Nile flood stages. The frequencies suggest resonance between multiple connected chambers, as if the entire underground network functions as a massive hydraulic organ. The acoustic properties change dramatically with water levels. During high water periods, the chambers produce deep, sustained tones that can be felt as much as heard. During low water periods, the frequencies shift to higher registers that create harmonics with the limestone bedrock itself. The ancient builders may have created an instrument that played different compositions throughout the year, synchronized with the astronomical and agricultural cycles that governed Egyptian civilization. This hydraulic orchestra would have required understanding of fluid dynamics, structural acoustics, and harmonic mathematics that supposedly didn't exist in the ancient world. Yet the evidence suggests not only that such knowledge existed, but that it was applied with precision that modern engineers struggle to match. The Edgar Cayce predictions, dismissed by mainstream archaeology but studied seriously by some American researchers, claimed that a hall of records lies beneath the Sphinx, containing documentation of advanced pre-flood civilizations. While the specific claims remain unverified, the general concept that important knowledge was deliberately preserved beneath the monument gains credibility as subsurface surveys reveal increasingly sophisticated engineering. If such records exist, they would likely be preserved in the uppermost chambers, above the water table, but below the reach of surface erosion. The flooding and draining cycles would have maintained stable humidity and temperature conditions ideal for preserving organic materials like papyrus, leather, or wood across millennia. The Egyptian government's reluctance to explore these chambers may stem from awareness of what they contain. Official statements emphasize structural stability concerns, but privately, some Egyptian archaeologists acknowledge that certain discoveries could fundamentally alter understanding of human history. Egypt's national identity is built on being the cradle of civilization, explains Dr. Farouk during an unguarded moment. To find evidence that we inherited rather than invented our achievements, that our ancestors preserved knowledge from an even older world, this creates complications beyond archaeology. It affects how we understand ourselves, how the world sees us, how we justify our role as guardians of humanity's past. The water beneath the Sphinx continues to rise and fall with the ancient rhythms, carrying whispers of whatever lies sealed in the darkness. Each flood cycle brings nutrients that feed the limestone, keeping the underground chambers alive and breathing. Each recession reveals acoustic spaces where silence has accumulated for thousands of years, waiting for the right resonance to awaken it. The night over Giza is a mirror of stone. When the sky darkens and the tourists vanish, the Sphinx becomes something else, no longer a monument but a presence. Its eyes, eroded by millennia yet unblinking, face east toward the horizon where the sun rises each day, as it has for thousands of years. But it is not the sun the Sphinx seems to await. It is something older, slower, the stars that drift across ages, marking the rhythm of forgotten time. The ancients said the Sphinx was a guardian, the sentinel of the horizon. Yet what does it guard? For centuries, it has watched the same heavens, patient as the desert itself. And like the pyramids, its alignment is precise. Its gaze points almost exactly to the spot on the horizon where the constellation Leo once rose around 10,500 BCE, the same era that marks the end of the last ice age, the time of the Great Flooding, the reset that rewrote the planet's history. Could it be that the Sphinx was carved not as a lion facing the future, but as one remembering the sky of the world before? Dr. Mendes's calculations, refined through years of astronomical modeling, confirm that the entire Giza complex functions as a massive star calendar. The monuments don't just align with current stellar positions, he explains, adjusting computer simulations that recreate the ancient sky. They encode the precession cycle, the 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis that slowly changes which stars appear at which positions throughout history. The builders understood that star positions change over vast periods. They created monuments that could track these changes across millennia, functioning as cosmic clocks that would remain accurate long after their civilization ended. The Sphinx gazing at Leo, the pyramids mirroring Orion's belt, the underground chambers aligned with the celestial equator. Together they form an astronomical computer capable of calculating time on scales that dwarf human history. This level of understanding suggests knowledge that transcends the timeline of accepted human development. To create such precise stellar alignments, the builders would have needed observational records spanning thousands of years. They would have required mathematical sophistication capable of predicting celestial mechanics across geological time periods. Where did such knowledge originate? American satellite imagery, declassified through Freedom of Information Act requests, reveals geometric patterns across the Sahara that align with similar astronomical principles. These formations, visible only from orbital altitudes, consist of circular and rectangular earthworks that correlate with stellar coordinates from the same epoch as the Giza alignments. Dr. Thornton's analysis of these satellite findings suggests a coordinated construction project spanning thousands of square kilometers. We're looking at monuments and earthworks positioned according to a master plan that covers significant portions of North Africa, he reports, overlaying GPS coordinates with astronomical calculations. The precision required to align structures across such distances using only observational astronomy indicates technological and organizational capabilities that challenge our understanding of ancient limitations. The pattern extends beyond Egypt. Similar astronomical alignments appear in monument complexes across the globe. Stonehenge in England, the temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico, the earthworks of Cahokia in North America. Each was built by supposedly isolated cultures that had no contact with each other, yet all encode the same astronomical knowledge with similar precision. The implications are staggering. Either human civilizations independently discovered complex astronomical mathematics multiple times throughout history, or they inherited this knowledge from a common source, a previous civilization that achieved scientific understanding and then transmitted it across vast distances and time periods. The serpent symbolism that appears in all these cultures may represent the mechanism of this transmission. The snake biting its own tail, the Ouroboros, symbolizes cyclical time, the eternal return of patterns that repeat across cosmic scales. Ancient builders may have understood that civilizations, like seasons, follow predictable cycles of growth, culmination, decline, and renewal. They built their monuments not as permanent achievements, but as messages to future cycles, information preserved in stone that would survive the periodic catastrophes that reset human development. Each pyramid, each aligned temple, each astronomical calendar carved in stone becomes a form of insurance against collective forgetting. The builders may have witnessed previous resets, understood the patterns of cosmic catastrophe, and dedicated their most advanced knowledge to creating survival systems that would function across dark ages. The monuments serve as both libraries and beacons, preserving essential information while marking the locations where future civilizations could recover what was lost. This perspective transforms the suppression of archaeological discoveries from bureaucratic caution into something approaching wisdom. If the monuments contain knowledge of cyclical catastrophes, of technologies that could be misused by unprepared civilizations, of evidence that human history follows predictable patterns of rise and fall, then perhaps some doors should remain closed until humanity demonstrates readiness to handle such revelations responsibly. The ancient Egyptians spoke of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance that maintains order against chaos. They understood that knowledge, like power, requires wisdom to wield safely. Too much revelation too quickly could destabilize the careful balance between progress and prudence that allows civilizations to survive their own capabilities. Perhaps the guardians of these sites, both ancient and modern, understand something we are only beginning to glimpse, that the greatest discoveries are also the most dangerous, and that protection sometimes requires concealment. When you stand in the shadow of those ancient stones, the air feels thicker, as though time itself is holding its breath. You might feel it just for a moment, the echo of a great silence that once fell across the world, the pause between one civilization's last heartbeat and another's first. That silence is not gone. It sleeps beneath the desert, beneath the noise of modern life, waiting. Because the earth remembers. It always remembers. The pyramids stand as monuments not to death, but to the cycles of forgetting and remembering that define human existence. They wait, patient as the stars they mirror, for a humanity quiet enough to hear what the stones have always been saying, that knowledge does not vanish when it is hidden. It simply changes form, waiting to be discovered again when the world is ready to listen. Dr. Pemberton closes his laptop as the first light of dawn touches the pyramid's apex. After decades of research, thousands of hours of data collection, countless bureaucratic battles and academic conferences, he has come to understand something that the ancient builders knew intuitively. The greatest mysteries are not meant to be solved, but experienced. The pyramid's chambers, the underground networks, the astronomical alignments, they function not as puzzles to be decoded, but as instruments of transformation, devices that change those who approach them with proper reverence. We've been asking the wrong questions, he reflects, watching the sun climb above the horizon in the same path it has followed since the monument was built. We wanted to know how they built it, when they built it, why they built it. But maybe the real question is, what does it build in us? Susan stands beside him, her recording equipment silent after a night of acoustic monitoring. The chambers have been singing again. Frequencies that pulse with Earth's magnetic field, harmonics that resonate with the water table beneath their feet. The builders understood something that modern science is only beginning to rediscover: that consciousness and matter exist in constant dialogue, that stone can hold memory, that architecture can alter awareness. The suppression of discoveries may not be conspiracy, but compassion, a recognition that certain knowledge carries responsibility that our current civilization may not be prepared to handle. The ancient priests encoded their wisdom in stone not because they wanted it hidden forever, but because they wanted it revealed only when humanity had developed the maturity to use it wisely. Perhaps we are approaching that threshold. American technology has finally become sophisticated enough to detect what the ancients preserved. Satellite imagery reveals the scope of their planning. Electromagnetic surveys map the precision of their engineering. Acoustic analysis confirms the sophistication of their understanding. Each measurement brings us closer to appreciating the true magnitude of what they achieved. Yet appreciation may be more important than explanation. The pyramid continues to function as its builders intended, not as a repository of facts to be extracted, but as a catalyst for transformation, a stone teacher that instructs through experience rather than exposition. Those who enter its chambers with proper preparation report altered states of consciousness, expanded awareness, direct perception of truths that cannot be captured in academic papers. In the cooling morning air, as the last stars fade behind the brightening sky, the Sphinx continues its eternal vigil. Its gaze remains fixed on the horizon, where new light emerges each day, carrying the same promise of renewal that has sustained human civilization through countless cycles of rise and fall. The erosion that has worn away its features becomes part of its message. Even stone changes, even monuments evolve, even the most permanent achievements of human ambition eventually return to the earth that made them possible. But the patterns endure. The astronomical alignments continue to function. The chambers still resonate at frequencies that affect human consciousness. The underground waterways still rise and fall with ancient rhythms. Whatever the builders embedded in stone transcends the physical materials they used to construct it. The desert wind carries whispers of sand across the plateau, covering fresh footprints, erasing yesterday's measurements, preparing a clean surface for tomorrow's investigations. This too is part of the design, the eternal cycle of revelation and concealment that ensures certain knowledge remains alive while avoiding the dangers of premature disclosure. As the sun climbs higher, tourists begin to arrive, cameras clicking, voices rising in wonder and speculation. The monuments absorb their attention as they have absorbed the attention of countless visitors across millennia. Each person who stands before these stones becomes part of the ongoing experiment in human consciousness that the builders initiated so long ago. Perhaps that was their ultimate achievement, not the creation of permanent structures, but the initiation of permanent questions. The pyramids do not provide answers so much as they cultivate the quality of mind capable of asking better questions. They teach patience, humility, reverence for mysteries that transcend individual understanding. In the end, what Egypt hides beneath the pyramids may be nothing more exotic than a mirror, a reflection of human potential that we recognize but do not yet fully comprehend. The chambers wait in darkness, not because they fear the light, but because they honor the timing necessary for true illumination. The stones remember everything. The desert preserves all secrets. And somewhere in the space between revelation and concealment, the future continues to take shape, guided by wisdom older than history, patient as starlight, deep as the silence that dreams beneath the sand.